The morning sun glinted off the glass conference room as Dwight Gable slid the tablet across the table. On the screen, a grainy image of me entering the Vanguard Systems building last Thursday evening was displayed. It was not damning evidence, but it was more than enough for what they had already decided to do. "We have received concerning reports about your after-hours activities," Dwight said, his voice neutral. "Our employment agreement explicitly prohibits working for another company while you are employed here." Beside him, Garrett Croft's lips curled into a sneer. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of betrayal," Garrett added, tapping his pen. As for me, I felt absolutely nothing. Not fear, not anger, not even surprise. There was just a strange, weightless lightness, as if gravity had suddenly loosened its hold on me. "You are terminated, effective immediately," Dwight continued, pushing a folder containing the termination letter toward me. "Security will escort you to collect your things." I did not argue with them. I did not explain that the photo was taken outside of my working hours, or that I was not violating any agreements. I simply nodded, took a deep breath, and said that they were right and that I should focus on one position. Their expressions flickered with confusion. They had expected tears, pleading, or an angry outburst, not this calm acceptance. What they could not see was the massive weight lifting from my shoulders as I placed my access badge on the table. 3 years of constant anxiety, of carrying an entire company's digital safety completely alone, evaporated in a single instant. Garrett cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with my composure. He told me they would need all of my passwords before I left. I smiled and told him that everything was documented in the system knowledge base, just as company protocol required. That documentation was technically complete, but practically useless without my years of contextual knowledge. As the security guard walked me to my cubicle, my colleagues stared. I packed my few personal items: a ceramic mug, a small succulent plant that had survived 3 years of neglectful watering, and a leather notebook full of complex architecture designs only I understood. Preston Hayes, our vice president of technology, watched me from his glass-walled office. His expression was completely unreadable, and he made no move to intervene, though he knew better than anyone what would happen to the network once I was gone. When the security guard escorted me through the lobby, the warm spring air hit my face, and I breathed deeply for the first time in years. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Russell Cole. He asked if we were still on for our meeting at 2 in the afternoon. I typed back a quick reply, telling him yes, and that I could now accept his full-time offer. 3 years of building someone else's empire was finally enough. I knew the countdown had begun the moment I walked out of that building. My name is Ethan Vance, and until 40 minutes ago, I was the lead network security architect at Aegis Tech, a Fortune 500 technology company. In fact, I was the only network security architect left. It was not supposed to be that way. When I started, there were 5 of us on the core team, but strategic budget cuts shrunk that number to 3, and subsequent resignations brought it down to just me. I never set out to become indispensable, because that is a very dangerous position to hold in corporate America. But with each passing quarter, as my team evaporated and my responsibilities multiplied, I found myself acting as the sole guardian of a digital kingdom worth billions. It had started 3 years ago when Preston Hayes recruited me from a smaller security firm. I still remembered his promises during my interview. He had told me that they were building a world-class security team and that I would lead a specialized group focusing on their proprietary systems. The salary was not spectacular, but the technical challenge was irresistible. The harsh reality arrived by month 3. The first round of strategic restructuring eliminated 2 senior positions on my team. By month 6, another colleague left for a much better salary elsewhere, and his replacement lasted only 4 months before budget freezes eliminated the position entirely. Preston Hayes assured me it was just a temporary situation and promised we would staff up next quarter. But next quarter became next year, and next year became a promise to reassess after the merger. The merger came and went, but I remained the only security architect. Meanwhile, the systems grew increasingly complex, our client base tripled, and the attack vectors multiplied. I built increasingly sophisticated protection measures, working nights, weekends, and holidays to keep pace with the emerging threats. When I warned them about critical vulnerabilities, my emails were acknowledged with polite nods, but the action items disappeared from the meeting minutes. When I requested additional staff, I was told to prioritize my time better. When I asked for compensation that matched my expanding responsibilities, I received praise instead of dollars. Preston would clap my shoulder and tell me I was their rock star and that nobody understood the systems like I did. That was the core problem. Nobody else did understand them, and nobody wanted to learn. I had offered to train others, to document the complicated architecture, but my offers were met with zero follow-through. Last winter, I prevented a massive data breach, exposing millions of client records by working 72 hours straight. When the crisis passed, I received a $500 gift card, while the chief executive officer took credit and received a seven-figure bonus. I realized I was not invaluable. I was simply invisible infrastructure that nobody sees until it fails. I scheduled a meeting with Preston Hayes and the executives, showing charts and explaining that our staffing was unsustainable. I warned them that if I were hit by a bus tomorrow, they would face serious problems within days. The chief financial officer shrugged, saying we needed better documentation, not headcount. I felt something break inside me. I had submitted documentation requests for 18 months, and they had been deprioritized every quarter. I left that meeting knowing that absolutely nothing would change, and that I needed to make a change for myself. My health was deteriorating rapidly, and my personal relationships were strained by constant late-night work emergencies. Then came the annual cybersecurity conference in Boston. I was not even supposed to attend because travel budgets were frozen, but the organizer was an old college friend who got me a speaking slot on adaptive threat response architectures. The company could not refuse the free industry publicity, so they let me go. That was where I met Russell Cole, the head of security for Vanguard Systems, our largest competitor. He caught me right after my presentation, genuinely impressed by the theoretical framework I had outlined. We talked for hours, carefully avoiding any specifics about our respective employers. It was just two professionals discussing theoretical approaches and architectural philosophies. It was the first real intellectually stimulating conversation I had experienced in years. As the conference came to an end, Russell handed me his card and suggested that they could use my perspective on their new security framework. He emphasized that it would be strictly advisory, weekends only, with no operational duties, and nothing that would create any conflicts of interest. The consulting fee he mentioned exceeded my monthly salary at Egistex for just a fraction of the time. I hesitated only briefly before accepting. The work was strictly advisory, reviewing their proposed systems and pointing out potential weaknesses without touching their actual infrastructure or violating confidentiality. For 8 weeks, I lived a double life. During the weekdays, I maintained the digital fortress that protected billions in assets at Aegis Tech, unrecognized and undervalued. On the weekends, I was respected, heard, and compensated appropriately for my expertise. Then last Thursday, I parked 2 blocks away from the Vanguard Systems office building for our regular meeting. Someone from Aegis Tech recognized my car, made a series of wild assumptions, and decided that I was dispensable. What they failed to understand was that their entire security infrastructure required specialized weekly adjustments that only I knew how to perform. Those adjustments were things I had tried to teach others, but nobody ever had the time or interest to learn. They were the precise maintenance tasks that prevented the exact cascade of system failures I had warned about repeatedly. As the security guard escorted me from the Aegis Tech building, my phone lit up with a text message from Russell Cole. He informed me that the advisory board had approved a full-time offer for me to join them as chief security architect, with a team of 8 specialists, triple my previous salary, and substantial equity options. I looked back at the gleaming office tower where I had given 3 years of my life and felt a sudden wave of peace. I texted Russell back, confirming that I could start on Monday. What my former employers did not realize as they rushed me out the door was that they did so during the end-of-quarter processing, a critical 72-hour window when their data traffic peaked, and their entire system required the specialized maintenance that only I performed. It was not sabotage, and it was not active revenge. It was simply the natural, predictable consequence of ignoring warnings and valuing systems over the people who build and maintain them. As I drove away, my phone began to ring with Preston Hayes' number. I smiled, turned off the ringer, and let the clock start ticking. By Friday afternoon, I had signed the employment contract with Vanguard Systems. The relief was physical, like putting down a heavy weight I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what normal life felt like. I spent the entire weekend preparing for my new role, sleeping more deeply than I had in years. There were no emergency alerts waking me at 3 in the morning, and no expectations of immediate responses to crises that could have been prevented with proper planning. On Monday morning, I arrived at Vanguard Systems headquarters dressed in a sharp new suit. The lobby's soaring ceilings and natural light were designed to impress, but it was the atmosphere of genuine respect that struck me the most. Russell Cole gave me a warm welcome and a thorough orientation tour, introducing me to my new team. A team of 8 specialists, each with defined roles that complemented one another, looked at me with curiosity and respect. They did not look at me with the desperate relief I had grown accustomed to at Aegis Tech when I arrived to solve a crisis. They were eager to collaborate and learn. By lunchtime on my first day, we were deep in an animated discussion about Vanguard's current architecture. They asked thoughtful, challenging questions, building upon my ideas rather than simply waiting for me to hand them a solution. This was what real professional collaboration felt like, and I realized how much I had missed it. Meanwhile, across town, the first warning signs were already appearing at Aegis Tech. I did not need any spies to tell me what was happening. The rhythms of their system were as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. Monday afternoon would bring the first major authentication bottlenecks, as the automated weekly credential refresh cycle attempted to execute without the manual override database adjustments I always performed. By Tuesday morning, the error log files would begin to overflow, significantly slowing down transaction response times. By Wednesday afternoon, exactly 72 hours after my abrupt departure, the cascading system failures would begin to peak during the height of their end-of-quarter processing. I felt a small twinge of guilt, not for the executives who had fired me, but for the regular employees and customers who would be caught in the crossfire of the leadership's short-sighted decisions. My phone buzzed at 4 in the afternoon on Monday. It was Preston Hayes. I let it go straight to voicemail. His voice sounded casual, attempting to mask any anxiety as he mentioned a minor issue with the authentication servers and asked me to call him back. I deleted the message. Tuesday morning brought 3 more calls from increasingly senior managers at Aegis Tech. By Tuesday afternoon, the tone of the messages had changed dramatically. A representative named Miriam Foster from the executive office left a message stating that their systems were experiencing significant slowdowns and that their technical team had been unable to resolve the issue. She stated that the chief executive officer had authorized her to discuss consulting terms for my temporary return to address these urgent matters. I texted back a single polite line, stating that I was focusing on one position now, as had been suggested during my termination meeting. At Vanguard Systems, I remained focused on building our new framework, surrounded by resources and support. Russell Cole checked in on me, expressing his satisfaction with how quickly I was settling in. He noted that they valued expertise, which was why their retention rate was triple the industry average. Late Tuesday night, my personal email chimed with a message from Preston Hayes marked as urgent. He stated that a critical system failure was imminent and asked me to name my consulting rate. I closed my laptop and went to sleep. Wednesday dawned bright and clear, and at our morning team meeting, we finalized the implementation plan for Vanguard's new security architecture. The energy in the room was electric, with 8 brilliant minds working together to build something robust and scalable. My phone began vibrating continuously around 2 in the afternoon, but I silenced it to keep my attention on the planning session. When I checked it later, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. One text was from Dwight Gable in HR, claiming that legal had reviewed my termination and that they may have acted hastily, begging me to call him. Another text came from Garrett Croft, stating that whatever Vanguard was paying me, Aegis Tech would double it. He added that the situation was critical, that national clients were losing access to their accounts, and that a board meeting was currently in progress. I felt no satisfaction in reading these messages, only a hollow confirmation of the warnings I had repeatedly given them. They had built a massive digital empire on my shoulders, and then pushed me away without understanding the engineering required to keep it standing. That evening, as I drove home, a breaking news alert flashed across my dashboard display, reporting a major service outage at Aegis Tech, with thousands of client accounts completely inaccessible. The mainstream financial media was already picking up the story, and the stock price was beginning to plummet. At home, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, watching the sunset in peace. My phone lit up again with Preston Hayes' number. This time, I decided to answer. "Ethan," he said, his voice ragged with physical and mental exhaustion. "Everything is failing. The sequential authentication breakdowns are cascading into the transaction processing layer, and nobody here knows how to stop it." I told him quietly that I had warned him for 3 years. He admitted that he knew and asked me to tell him what to do, promising to pay any price. I took a slow sip of my wine and told him that it was not about price anymore, but about value. I pointed out that they had only valued what I produced, not my expertise, and that they had ignored my repeated warnings about sustainability. Silence stretched over the line. I told Preston that the recovery procedure was fully documented in the disaster recovery files I had submitted the previous year, the very documentation that had been deprioritized because they assumed I would always be there to handle the crises. I ended the call and turned off my phone for the night. Thursday morning, I arrived at Vanguard Systems to find Russell Cole waiting for me in the lobby. He showed me a tablet with a headline detailing the massive tech failure that had erased billions of dollars in Aegis Tech's market value. Their database was locked. Transaction processing had been down for 16 hours, and the stock had dropped 40% since the opening bell. Russell informed me that Aegis Tech had been calling Vanguard's executive offices, trying to reach me, and that they were now threatening legal action, claiming that I had actively sabotaged their systems before leaving. My stomach tightened, but Russell quickly reassured me. He stated that Vanguard's legal team had already reviewed my employment contract and exit procedures and confirmed that I was completely clear of any wrongdoing, but that Aegis Tech was desperate for someone to blame. As we walked to my office, the familiar stress tried to creep back in, but I reminded myself that I had done nothing wrong. My team was waiting for me, their faces showing concern. Julian Thorne asked if the news about my former employer was true, and another team member asked if I had really built their entire security infrastructure by myself. I explained that I had done it out of absolute necessity, not by choice. A silent understanding passed between us, the shared recognition of what it felt like to be the unacknowledged foundation of a company. Julian smiled and said that Aegis Tech's disaster was educational for us, and that we should make sure Vanguard Systems never depended on a single person, including me. The simple wisdom of that statement was incredibly refreshing. This was true leadership, acknowledging expertise while actively preventing unhealthy dependency. We returned to our work, designing resilience into every layer of our new architecture, while the news for Aegis Tech grew steadily worse. Regulators had launched an investigation, clients were defecting to competitors, and the stock had dropped another 15%. My phone, which I had turned back on, displayed 57 missed calls. The last one was from an unknown number, and the voicemail was from Douglas Ward, the chairman of the board of directors. He stated that the situation had become completely untenable, and that the board had removed several executives that morning, including Dwight Gable and Garrett Croft. He acknowledged the systemic failures that led to my departure and asked me to call him directly to discuss how we might move forward. I sat with this message for a long time, contemplating my next move. Part of me wanted to let them continue paying the full price of their arrogance, But another part of me recognized that regular employees and innocent clients were suffering for the leadership's failures. During our afternoon meeting, Russell Cole pulled me aside and informed me that Aegis Tech's newly appointed Chief Technology Officer had reached out directly, offering an astronomical consulting fee for just 1 day of my time, handled completely remotely with no ongoing commitment. Russell advised me that professionally, helping them would not harm Vanguard, and that personally the decision was entirely mine. As I walked back to my desk, Julian Thorne fell into step beside me and suggested that sometimes the most powerful message is not letting someone fail completely, but showing them exactly what they lost by letting them see you succeed elsewhere. He noted that if I helped them recover, they would always know that I could have prevented the disaster and that I was gracious enough to help them despite how they had treated me. That kind of knowledge, Julian said, changes organizations more than bankruptcy. I considered this perspective carefully as I sat at my desk. I realized that letting their company collapse was as a passive form of revenge, but forcing them to accept my terms and acknowledge their mistakes was a much more profound form of accountability. My finger hovered over Douglas Ward's phone number, and I decided to make the call. When he answered, I kept my tone professional and neutral, stating that I understood they were experiencing technical difficulties. That was a major understatement, and Douglas Ward immediately admitted that their entire infrastructure was non-functional and that their team was helpless. Douglas Ward explained that the board had reviewed my employment history and my recent termination and recognized that serious mistakes had been made regarding my warnings and staffing requests. He stated that they were prepared to offer substantial compensation for my assistance in resolving the crisis, telling me to name my figure. I thought about this moment during many sleepless nights, imagining the satisfaction of rejecting their desperate pleas. But Julian's words resonated with me. I told Douglas that my consulting rate was $50,000 per hour, with a 4-hour minimum engagement paid in advance to my specified account. I added that I had several non-negotiable conditions beyond the financial compensation. Douglas did not hesitate, agreeing immediately and asking for my conditions. I stated my first condition. I would work completely remotely and would not set foot in their building. He accepted. My second condition was that I would provide instructions only, and that their remaining technical team would implement them, as I would not directly access their systems. He agreed, noting that it was challenging but acceptable. My third condition was that I receive a formal, public letter of apology from the company, acknowledging that I had warned them about these specific vulnerabilities repeatedly and had been ignored. Douglas paused, but I reminded him that the legal implications of this acknowledgement were far less severe than bankruptcy, and he agreed. My fourth condition was that every member of my former security team, who had been laid off during the recent budget cuts, must receive 6 months of full severance pay and positive professional references. This was a critical point for me, as their sudden termination had violated the Federal Warning Act, which is documented under Title 29, Section 2101 of the United States Code. Under the Warning Act, employers with 100 or more employees are required to provide 60 days of advance written notice before a mass layoff, which Aegis Tech had completely ignored. By securing this severance, I was forcing them to resolve this legal violation and do right by my former colleagues. Douglas agreed to this as well. My fifth and final condition was that they must fully fund and create the security team structure I had originally proposed, with market-rate salaries and proper management support to ensure the remaining staff would not be overworked. I explained to Douglas that, without these structural changes, they would find themselves in the exact same position in 6 months when the next security professional burned out and left. I heard the sound of papers shuffling and muffled voices on the other end of the line as he conferred with the remaining board members. He finally returned to the line and stated that they agreed to all of my terms, asking how soon I could begin. I told him that once the payment was transferred and I received written confirmation of all conditions, I would start immediately. After ending the call, I sat quietly at my desk, letting the reality of the situation settle around me. This was not the chaotic, destructive revenge of a movie, but a structured enforcement of accountability, change, and professional recognition. Russell Cole knocked on my door and asked how the negotiation had gone, and I explained the terms of the agreement. Russell smiled and expressed his approval of using their crisis to force systemic structural change. He noted that it was not just about making them pay, but about ensuring that the next person would not have to endure the same treatment. He added that this approach actually aligned perfectly with Vanguard's next strategic phase, as the board had just approved a proposal to launch a dedicated security consulting division. I looked up in surprise as Russell explained that they had already received 17 inquiries from other companies since the news of Aegis Tech's failure broke. These companies were terrified that they might have the same hidden vulnerabilities in their own networks. And Russell stated that there was nobody better to lead this new division than me, someone who had just proved how essential proper security architecture and staffing truly are. The pieces of my career were clicking into place in a way I could have never anticipated. My difficult experience at Aegis Tech was not just a painful memory. It was becoming a transformative opportunity for my career and for the industry as a whole. Russell asked me to present the concept and a proposed staffing plan at next week's leadership meeting. After he left my office, I opened my laptop to prepare for the emergency consultation. Within minutes, my email notification chimed with the payment confirmation of $200,000 and a signed document from Douglas Ward agreeing to all of my conditions. I immediately sent the detailed recovery instructions to the Aegis Tech technical team. It was a step-by-step procedure to resolve the authentication cascade failure, using the exact steps I had documented months ago that had been buried in their unread reports. As I expected, questions flooded back almost immediately. The remaining team members, who had been left to manage the network without proper training, lacked the contextual understanding of the system to implement the recovery steps without guidance. For the next 4 hours, I guided them through the process via a secure video call, explaining the logic behind each step and teaching them what the company should have allowed me to teach them. Months ago, midway through the session, Preston Hayes joined the video call. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights, and he looked older than his years. He attempted to apologize, but I interrupted him politely, stating that this was not the time for personal apologies, and that we needed to focus entirely on the recovery of the system. By the end of the 4-hour session, the Aegis Tech network was stabilizing. The authentication flows were restored, and transaction processing was slowly resuming. It was too late to prevent the massive damage to their public reputation and their stock price, but it was just in time to prevent a complete and irreversible collapse of their business. As we prepared to end the call, I delivered one final message to the assembled technical team. I told them that every system they were working with had fully documented maintenance procedures and identified vulnerabilities, and that those documents existed in the folders that had been deemed low priority for review. I urged them to read them and learn them, because building system resilience is ultimately about people understanding their responsibilities, not just about the technology itself. I closed my laptop, watching the sunset paint the skyline in gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian Thorne, asking if I was joining the team for drinks to celebrate our new architecture. For the first time in 3 years, I had no emergency alerts to monitor, no systems that would implode without my attention, and no expectation of endless work. I had colleagues, not dependents, and clear boundaries. I texted back that I was on my way. 1 month later, I presented our new security consulting division to Vanguard's executive team. The slides detailed the opportunities created by Aegis Tech's public failure. I explained that our approach was to change how organizations value and structure security teams. The board's approval was unanimous. We quickly expanded my new division to 20 specialists and signed our first clients. That afternoon, Douglas Ward emailed me with updates since my consultation. Aegis Tech had hired the full security team structure I recommended, including a chief security officer reporting directly to the board. My public apology letter had run in the business section that morning. Most importantly, they had reviewed all deprioritized documentation, uncovering critical insights. Douglas admitted the lessons were steep, with their market value remaining 30% lower, but the cultural change was profound. Douglas concluded by stating that, if I ever wished to return, their door was open. I deleted the email without replying. My answer was already visible in industry announcements about my role. 3 months after my firing, I spoke at the Boston Cybersecurity Conference. This time, I was not a lone, exhausted architect. I was the head of a growing division, presenting our framework for resilience. In the audience sat Preston Hayes and their new chief security officer. Their expressions as I detailed our rapid client growth told me everything. They understood that what they had lost was the entire future I was now building with their competitor. After my presentation, a crowd of attendees swarmed the stage with questions and business cards. Among them was the new chief security officer from Aegis Tech, who waited patiently until the others had dispersed. She acknowledged that my replacement system was impressive and admitted that their rebuilt architecture was built entirely on the foundation of my documentation, which she described as extraordinary, once someone actually took the time to read it. She noted that I had saved the company even while I was leaving. I smiled and replied that some lessons can only be learned through direct consequences. As I gathered my presentation materials, she added that the executives at Aegis Tech track my success obsessively now, measuring every client acquisition and announcement against what could have been theirs if they had treated me differently, and that was the true ultimate revenge. It was not their failure, but my visible success. It was not their financial loss, but my personal and professional gain. Every achievement at Vanguard Systems was a constant reminder to them of what they had discarded. Every innovation my team produced reflected what they could have easily had if they had simply listened, valued my expertise, and supported my work. The most devastating consequence for them was not the system failure or the drop in stock price. It was the daily experience of watching me build elsewhere, the exact future they had prevented me from building. With 6 months to the day after my termination, Vanguard Systems announced that our security consulting division had become the fastest-growing segment of the company, with a client list that included 3 Fortune 100 corporations. That evening, Julian Thorne organized a team celebration at a local restaurant. Looking around the table at the 20 brilliant specialists, none of them overworked, none of them undervalued, and each contributing their unique expertise, I realized this was the real victory. It was not watching my former employer struggle, but creating a healthy environment where talent could thrive and expertise was respected. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is simply building the life and career you deserve.